Well, the funding fight between the federal government and the MTA taking center stage at a board meeting today.
Okay, Fox 5's Arthur Chien live from Lower Manhattan. And Arthur, what do we learn?
Well, we learned that this war of words continues to escalate as Washington and the Trump administration in particular take on New York, trying to force it to cut congestion pricing, at this point threatening to defund the MTA if they do not submit. Now, if things weren't ugly enough as it was before, this weekend when Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy visited New Jersey, standing next to Governor Phil Murphy there, you heard maybe the bleep behind me, because he called the New York City subway system a quote-unquote blank hole, using an expletive that we're not allowed to use on television. Now, Duffy continued railing on the MTA today with a social media post accusing the state agency of financial mismanagement. Well, the full board met this morning and shot back, inviting the Transportation Secretary to read over their budget, which is a fully public document, which they say also shows for the past several years has been operating without a deficit, unlike the federal budget. They even invited the Secretary of Transportation to come down for himself to meet with them so they can brief him on all this data that is public. Have a listen in.
The mismatch between what riders in New York bring and what we get from the federal government's out of whack. We send $44 billion from the state to Washington, and we don't get it back. And as I said on Monday, and I mean this sincerely, I'm not being funny, like, I invite the Secretary of Transportation to come to our Finance Committee meeting at noon on April 28th.
You're not going to mess with our 6 million riders just as a political game. We have to be clear that the riders are depending on us, and they're depending on the federal government to treat them fairly and based on facts. And we're just going to keep that approach.
Now, speaking of the facts, the CEO and chair of the MTA pointed out that when it comes to federal funding for mass transit, while the MTA serves half the mass transit users in this country on a daily basis, it gets 17% of the funding on the federal side. So he says New Yorkers were already getting shortchanged, and threatening the remaining 17% is just purely irresponsible. At this point, the next thing is for the MTA to respond to Sean Duffy's letter. They say they will do it before his deadline at the end of this month. That's the latest from here at the MTA's headquarters in Lower Manhattan. Arthur Chien, Fox 5 News. Steve, back to you.
All right, thanks, Arthur.